Well, hello there, Zoo Crew. Today I got another video for you. This one specifically about Burn. I had a good match against Burn forever ago, but he wouldn't do a game like 2 or 3, and it wasn't really good. The guy was very raging, so I couldn't do it until I got another good version against Burn, and that just happened. So I can show you another matchup. This one specifically being the matchup of Burn. Now then, moving on. Let's talk about it. This is the deck I'm using. I'm not going to go into quickly about the deck. You can always go to the MTG Salvation Zoo thread in the Modern sub if you want to talk more about it there. But let's talk about what is Burn. Now, Burn is more and more so getting closer back to red deck wins, which I think it should be, anyways, personally. But that's just a side tangent. Burn and red deck wins are very similar. Burn is less in your favor than red deck wins is, because red deck wins you can interact with things like kill spells, like Path to Exile's Lightning Bolts. But as creature damage is getting pushed more and more, as it has been with things like Eidolon the Great Revel, it's becoming a bit more in your favor, especially now that they're using, more than anything else, the card that's making them awesome is Atarka's Command, which asks that you run a certain amount of creatures. So they're even running things like Wild Noctowl in their main deck. Now then, let's talk about what do we do here. Now, Burn is generally, if it's Burn, just a pure Burn deck, then they're about a full turn faster than you. If it's a red deck wins, they're about a half a turn faster than you. How can you be a half a turn slower than a different deck? Well, it's just like, not only is it average, sometimes you're on the same speed, sometimes they're a turn faster, and the average then being a half. It also means that, like, sometimes you have the win in hand, like they're at 3 life and you've got a bolt in your hand, but you're in a weird place that if you bolt them, they bolt you in response and you lose the game because you're probably at 3 life too. Or you wait then and you say, all right, I'll bolt them when I'll bolt them in response to them trying to bolt me, and they won't do it, and then they'll just untap, draw a card, bolt you, and then you'll bolt them in response, and then in response to your bolt, they'll bolt you again, and you'll die. That's where the half a turn faster comes. Now, as such, just like Affinity, you gotta choose whether you are a turn faster, or I'm sorry, whether you are faster than them or you not. Are you the beatdown? Are you the tempo deck? Or are you the control deck? It's much more cut and dry here than it is against the Affinity deck. That you're probably not going to be the tempo deck. You're either going to be the control deck or you're going to be the beatdown. And this match that I found, or that I had, I luckily got to be both, so I thought it was a good example to show off. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I lose the draw, or I lose the dice roll, and this guy starts off with a red and goes into Monastery Swiftsphere. This automatically means that he's red deck wins. There's maybe Suicide Zoo and Shotgun Elemental that will run a Swiftspear out there turn 1. Maybe Delver, although this generally means it's probably not Delver. There's the occasional American Delver. But what I opt to do is I have to look at my starting hand, decide what I want to do. Do I want to get aggressive, try to put down the Noble Hierarch, get into a Tarmogoyf, try to beat down, or do I want to be a little bit more controlling, put the Voice of Resurgence out there, use my Path to Exile? Like, maybe I want to use my Path to Exile right away. I could crack this for a white source and go for it. But I decide that I think I got to survive the initial outblast. I'm going to need mana, so I'm going to probably go with these Noble Hierarch. That way I can start doing double duty, like putting Voice of Resurgence out there to block, and then Path at the same time, eat my Voice of Resurgence later on. I got to think a couple steps ahead of time. I just can't be like throwing things out there nilly-willy. I need to think about what's the best way to survive until around turn 4ish. If I can survive till around turn 4ish, I should have it in the bag. So that's what I opt to do then. I go with the Noble Hierarch. He doesn't burn out my Noble Hierarch. Instead, he goes for the Monastery Swiftspear, which I think is the correct call here. It's just try to be aggressive as possible, especially with me being open. One of the plus sides is if you're playing small zoo, it's a lot harder to beat red deck wins because you got to fetch for, like, with you got to fetch constantly for dual lands, and that'll hurt you. But on the flip side, if you are sort of a bigger zoo, or just a zoo that's more focused in 2 colors rather than 3 colors, like this is more focused in green and white, you can kind of forego red or forego maybe white, especially if the white's only a splash for like things like Path to Exile, to sort of conserve on your life total. And that's what I'm going to end up doing here. I actually going to see in game 1 not even go for red here. I draw a second Scavenging Ooze. Second Scavenging Ooze is not nearly as good as the first one. But I'm going to go ahead and put the Voice of Resurgence out there. I'm going to let the turn pass that way. And note, I left my voice up, or I left my Noble Hierarch up. This is so that in an emergency I could block something and path it if I had to. It would feed my Scavenging Ooze later on if I got down the line. I'd rather have the mana to, so that way I can drop it and start feeding my Scavenging Ooze right away. I figured I was going to drop this. He might fight over it, bolt it, and then I dropped the second one. But we'll see. So I ended up doing this, and I got, alright, go ahead and have emergency Path to Exile. I gotta make sure that thing isn't around here. Whenever they do this, they've got something up. This needs to get blocked. This could get as big as 3-4 damage, so I got to make sure I block here. And the voice, I'm not trying to keep the voice alive for any situation. I want the voice dead. The token's actually more relevant to me than that is. But I'm going, as you can see, my life total is now very low at 7. I wish I had a red source, but I would be at like 5 or 4 if I got the red source, so I don't regret not getting the red source, and I still have another Path to Exile here. So my choices are open. I can either go for the Tarmogoyf just to block, or I can go for the Scavenging Ooze and eat my Voice of Resurgence to try to gain life. And at 7 life, I think I'm too much in the red zone. I need to gain life. I need to get closer to 10 life if I can help it. He's got 2 cards left in hand, so assuming that he draws Bolt, 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 I'm dead. But I can maybe crawl my way out of there with Scavenging Ooze. Even if I can just, like, if his hand turns out to be Bolt, in his 3 will come next turn, it's Bolt, Bolt, Goblin Guide. It won't be good enough if I put the Scavenging Ooze out there. I can survive that. So, you gotta just think about your outs here, because you're constantly playing towards your outs. So, in the end, he doesn't do anything. That pretty much leads me to believe that he's either got lands in hand or he's got Goblin Guides, Monastery, Swift Spears in hand. And those are pretty bad when I'm putting up this frontal, like, assault where I can kill him with this or kill him with this. I don't mind blocking stuff either, But I'm going to emergency gain some life here just because it's at the end of turn. I don't want to waste my thing. I don't want to path here. I'd rather actually block here so that I could eat it later. I could draw my 3rd Scavenging Ooze. I only got 3 in the deck. And I go, alright, well, I'm going to put out the Tarmogoyf, strictly because the Tarmogoyf will still be able to block. But what I'm figuring here is, even if he's got, like, nothing but Goblin Guide haste creatures in hand, I can actually survive it now with this. What I can't survive is a bunch of bolts. But I need to start putting the clock on, and I figured, alright, this token by itself is a 5-turn clock, and I have 3 blockers, so even if he puts down attackers, I still can emergency block with this Noble Hierarch. It hitting the bin means that I get to eat it with the Scavenging Ooze. I can put my Tarmogoyf in front of things, and if it gets big, and the Tarmogoyf dies, that's fine. I can eat the Tarmogoyf. Yes, the Tarmogoyf could have been a 4-5 to block, but I'm not trying to do that. I literally am just trying to make sure that I can survive. I want to get this closer to 10 if I can. Anyways, so let's go ahead and fast forward here. So I attack. I get the attack off. It's put him at 10. I'm not expecting any of my creatures to live. I'm just expecting to ping away with this token if I can help it. I end up pathing this guy, and let's see, it was his turn because he didn't do anything. I swear he either had lands in hand or not enough burn to kill me with this Noble Hire, or this Monastery Swift Spear. He probably most likely had some haste creatures in hand, and that is just not going to do it with this wall here. Pathing that next turn, then because he didn't put out any creatures, he probably had haste creatures, and he was thinking that maybe he could catch me unawares with my guys tapped down, my shields down. I would be able to then re-attack back out here with 3 damage plus 4 damage. So that's enough right there to kill him. That's exactly enough, actually. If I grabbed a land here, I probably wouldn't have bolted. I think I just would have put down more Scavenging Oozes, so that way if one of my Scavenging Oozes died from blocking, I could eat it with the other Scavenging Ooze. I don't care how big the Scavenging Ooze is, by the way. I just care that I gain life off of that. So let's go to game 2. So I was pretty clearly the control in that matchup, and I figured out my role very easily. This, I actually opened up a hand. I know it flashes. I try to pause it quick. That didn't have enough mana. It had some good effects to it, but it didn't have enough mana. It was just like, and I couldn't risk not being able to get to the mana. So I went ahead and just looked at this hand and said, all right, well, look, I can kind of beat down here. I've got enough mana to here that I can start off with a Wild Noctil, and then go into... I have to take some damage ahead of time, which I won't enjoy, but I can take some early damage, and I can go ahead and beat down equally as much. So I'm hoping that this beatdown hand... I'm actually probably playing to game 2 is what's happening. And what happens when I see that that he did nothing with his stuff, he's either got a bolt or he doesn't have anything, but regardless, the worst thing that I could have seen was a haste creature. That would have just made my life hell. But since I didn't see a haste creature out, I decided that even though I drew a Noble Hierarch, which I can then, I have to make the choice. Do I want to be the control deck or do I want to be the aggro deck? Looking at just the hand I have, I know that even if choosing aggro is not the smartest decision that I can do here right now, I know it's pretty much the only decision I can do because of the hand that's been dealt with me, and if I try to force the control, I won't be able to run it. So it's going to be a tight game, and I'm well aware of that. So I'm going to go for the Stomping Ground first, so that way I can go get a basic next and then a basic after that, and then by the time this comes around, I'll probably have tapped. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna either be dead or alive. Seeing that he did nothing, I've realized that he's got the 2 converted mana cost hand. That's something that a lot of burn decks have been doing lately, is that they're just very high on 2 converted mana cost or 3 converted mana cost spells. I should say red deck wins. Burn doesn't normally do that as much. Or it could be a little color screwed. But regardless, I know that my answer here is just to try to beat down as fast as possible. Especially with this. If this gets bolted, that's fine. Now, I had a choice here to put down 2 Noble Hierarchs and try to double down on it. I get blown out of the water with a bolt there, though, so I didn't like that plan. And I have nothing in my hand that it's forcing me to be if I had a Scavenging Ooze in my hand, I'd be yeah, it's perfectly fine. Then just try to start gaining life. Or even a Core Firewalker or something, that would be fine. But with this, it's just a little bit safer. I got to stick with the beatdown plan, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do this. He's going to go ahead and path my Tarmogoyf, which is, I guess, fine. It opens up the way for the haste creatures. That might be the other reason, is that he didn't do anything, was because I just had Noble Hierarchs, or Wild Noctils out and didn't want to trade. I ended up drawing the Scavenging Ooze here, and that's perfectly fine draw here. I opt to put 2 Noble Hierarchs out instead of putting the Scavenging Ooze. I don't want to get my Scavenging Ooze just blown out with a bolt. Scavenging Ooze might be the key to keeping this guy off my back long enough that I can win with just by beating down here. Plus the 2, it also gives me 5/5. And I figured if he didn't blow out my Noctil by now, he's not going to blow me out. He ends up bolting my face. I think that's the wrong decision. I think when I'm facing a 5/5 Noctil, I probably bolt it, especially when it's going to put me at a lower life and start losing the race. But I guess he's fine here. And I actually opt to block here. My main reasoning is, like I said, anything below 10 against a burn deck, you are severely, even especially with 4 cards in hand, you are severely coming down to red zone. And I want a creature in my graveyard if I can help it, so that I can eat it with the ooze. And I opt to eat it with my ooze. Now, he's going to fight me for it, and I take a little bit of time to think about this. He's going to go ahead and Atarkus command me, deal 3 damage to me, and not let me gain life. This is pretty clear that he's got stuff in hand that either he's got, he's going to hope that I trade with this, my Scavenging Ooze to the Goblin Guide, or that he's got 9 damage in his hand, which is something that, he's got 3 cards in his hand. He could have 9 damage in his hand and then draw a land next turn and not have the kill. So I would rather fight him over it. Or he could even have 4 damage. It could be that he had bolts, and a Boros Charm. That could exactly be what's in his hand, and just thinking about it. I got to play to my outs. I need to gain the life here. I need to make sure I can block haste creatures. I need to make sure that he can't bring me down to the red zone so that I lose in 2 turns rather than 1 turn. So that being in the choice, I was like, no, I gotta gain this life. I'm only going after one thing anyway, so it's perfectly fine. I'll just double down on it. I would have rather put down the Noctil. If I could have, I would have put down the Nacatl and attacked with this guy. Got in there for damage, and I know if I did that, I would have won the race. But he ended up doing the Atarka's Command because I want to make sure that I could stay above the threshold of life that I felt like I needed to maintain. I left my Nacatl back just in case there was some haste creatures coming down. Here he comes with a bolt. He opts to bolt me. I think he's deciding that his only out is to try to hit my head. There's nothing in the graveyard yet. He could be afraid of another Scavenging Ooze, for example, too. So he doesn't want to kill it off. But the path is a much better thing. I, by the way, would never side in path against Zoo. Just putting that out there. If you're a burn deck, just burn. It's like if that was a bolt, I probably could have been very close to dead here. So he ends up, like keeping the Nacatl back was the correct choice, because if he had a bolt in hand, and if that was a bolt or anything, any kind of removal, he was just able to then hit me for 2 and then bolt me, I would have been dead. So it's these weird sort of things. I was thinking about bolting right away, but then I was like, no, I'll hold off on it, because maybe some math will happen. He'll go ahead and crack this for a shock land, and I can bolt him and kill him. I'm gonna just attack for 4. I've got a blocker here. I'm pretty sure that he's with only 1 card in hand, 2 cards in hand, he can't kill me. At this point, I'm thinking the card that he's got in hand is a haste creature, and as long as I have a blocker, I should be fine. I've got 2 blockers here, so even if he kills off paths, somehow destroys my 1 Nacatl and attacks, I still have a blocker in the form of Noble Hierarch. Plus, I can bolt something else if I had to. That's my primary thing, so I'm going to use the bolt for removal very, very, very likely. So even if you were to put down 3 haste creatures, I'd still be able to come out on top of that situation with this setup. I'm trying to think of what else to say here. Yeah, so I just think that's probably what's going to end up happening in the future. And if he draws bolt, you know what? I'm dead anyways, so there's nothing I can really do here. He ends up having a Goblin Guide, and I'm like, okay, cool. I think he realizes the writing's on the wall here, that he has to survive to a bolt. He probably has a bolt in his hand, but he knows that if he did this and killed off my Noctil and then attacked, then I'm only at 3, and he could kill me next turn, but I could also kill him maybe on the swing back, or if I have a bolt, I could blow him out of the water that way. I did tap for red very briefly. Drawing this Nacatl, I'm like, alright, I know I've got this win, because I can, again, set up another blocker, and I still have a bolt back up. My holding the bolt was because, again, I'm just thinking I gotta maybe beat down. And if he splits it, then I can bolt him. If he splits it, that's perfectly fine. He loses his creatures. He goes to 2 cards in hand. I think that might have been better if he split it, because then he loses both his creatures. He draws a card. If it's a bolt, I lose the game. He could be worried that a Scavenging Ooze is in my hand. I did use a Scavenging Ooze to kill him earlier, and I did Scavenging Ooze to keep myself above the threshold of dying to things like a Boros Charm. If there was a Boros Charm in his hand, I would be dead. If I didn't eat that 1 creature with my Scavenging Ooze. So he could be trying to figure out multitudes of things. There could also just be a land in his hand, and he's just not winning the game unless he has a Goblin Guide out in the field. But regardless, this is the holding the bolt gave me the leverage and gave me the advantage. Or if you want to beat red deck wins just like a pro, do this every time, just every time. Yeah, man, 2 core Firewalkers. Just do it. Just do it. That's how you stop them. Alright, so what did I sideboard in, by the way, against those decks? I always generally sideboard in the same thing. Thalia, core Firewalkers, the Dromoka's commands. Those are what I side in. This is not the best answer in the world against burn, but it helps. This is not the best answer in the world against burn, but it helps. This is the best answer in the world against burn. That's just point blank. But like against a deck that you're unfavored for, you got to side in the things that will help you win the game, even if it's just like if it's not going to totally help you win the game. Even if it just delays a single bolt, it'll help you maybe win that game. Let's talk about cards that will help you full on win the game. If you live long enough to use this as a blocker, it's pretty alright. Elixir of Immortality isn't going to win you the game, but could help you. It just survived long enough to maybe put your own clock in there. Oh, Path to Exile is alright against them. Not fantastic, but pretty alright. Let's see what else we've got. I've used Swan Song before. It's not my favorite thing in the world to use. Spell Pierce, however, is very, very good, as is Dispel. If you're running Blue Zoo. If you're running Domain Zoo and you have things like Duress in the sideboard, I would use a Duress. However, I wouldn't go out of my way to use it. Problem is, since you're most certainly in the Naya colors, this guy actually is just girl, I should say. This is just a way to delay sort of the inevitable, but if you're doing 3 damage to yourself to get yourself black just to stop a bolt, then you're just doing their work for them. It's not really like helping you all that much. Moving on, let's see what else you can use against them. Incremental life gain is generally better than huge life gain, but huge life gain can work if you time it correctly and you're aware they can't undo you with a skull crack or something. I've seen people using Boggles, Nature's Claim their own card to survive. I thought that was kind of cool. Just bringing it up. It's very rarely that you're going to be able to do that, but that's a possibility. I use Dragon's Claw in a number of decks. If I can't reliably get white, I won't use Core Firewalker. I will use Dragon's Claw. I've got no regrets making that decision. Some people will try to force the Core Firewalker in there, and while, as you saw, Core Firewalker does win you the game, just pretty much point blank. Most times I should clarify that going just for Dragonclaw might not win you the game like that, because it doesn't give you protection, doesn't give you blocks. However, and doesn't allow you to attack straight through with 2 damage at least. However, if you're taking 6 damage to cast a Core Firewalker, Dragonclaw's better. Just because they can easily that can be enough off of your own land damage just to kill you. Back in the olden days, we used to play Rest for the Weary. Now, Rest for the Weary is not as good as Feed the Clan. Feed the Clan is much better. We'll get to Feed the Clan in a second. You also are going to have things like Thalia. Like I said, Thalia is not that great, but it kills them on a one-lander. That's for sure. But aside from that, it also can maybe slow them down. A smart burn player will know not to ignore it, but hey, 3 damage. It's basically a 2-mana prevent 2-mana gain 3 life card, because it stops a bolt from going into your face more often than not. Now, Core Firewalker is your best card that you can bring in. It's just, you can block with it, you can attack through things with it, you gain 1 life every time they do stuff, which effectively turns all their bolts into shocks. Now, you got to be careful when you're blocking with it, though. However, less now than before because of Skullcrack and Skullcrack. Well, actually, it's just Skullcrack. Skullcrack was good because what it did against you, I should say bad. What it did against you was, I'm trying to just find it real quick so that way I can pull it up. I lose my own stuff. There we go. Players can't gain life this turn. I mean, they could theoretically go like use Skullcrack and then do a bunch of burn spells to stop you from being able to gain any life and just kill you out in 1 turn. But the big thing is damage can't be prevented. Now, back in the day of Zendikar, that was huge in Standard for red deck wins against the blue-white control decks that brought in Core Firewalker. And this didn't exist. It was unstable footing, by the way. But that means that if you are caught unawares and you block with this and then they Skullcrack you, you're going to lose your Core Firewalker. That's the only way your Core Firewalker dies in that situation. But it's still a way that your Core Firewalkers die, and you need to be aware of that, because sometimes blocking is not the best decision. However, I'm of the camp that, like, well, you should block if you have to. Like, if you look at it and you're like, if I don't block this and I die, I'm not going to gain enough life off my Core Firewalker that I'm not going to die off of these barrage barrage of burn coming towards me. And you just got to be like, all right, so I got to block then. So, block wisely. Just make sure that you know what you're doing when you do it. Moving right along, negate works pretty good. Stubborn Denial, I passed that, but that works also pretty all right against them. Unified Will if you're playing that kind of thing. Bant Charm if you're playing Bant Charm, but Bant Charm's a little expensive at that point. Moving right along. There's really nothing in red that helps against the mirror. I've been in weird situations where you use like Eidolon the Great Revel to try to like slow his roll and win with just your creatures that are currently on the board. You really got to be careful if you're doing that. Searing Blood, Searing Blaze will help you win the speed tie if you are playing sort of like a Nacatl Burn kind of deck or Gruul Rush. Feed the Clan is a great card. It was better before. There's 6 Skullcracks when we're talking about Atarka's Command here. P.S. Atarka's Command does not have the prevention clause, so if you know they've got Atarka's Command in their hand, you can feel free to block with your core Firewalker. A lot of times people won't even have Skullcrack in the main; they'll have 2 in the sideboard. So, and that's what I do. So game 1, if you are crazy and you have core Firewalker in the main, like we did maybe during the Delver meta, then feel free to block with it. Yeah, and this guy's good. You just need to make sure that you time it correctly to not get Atarka's Command skull cracked when you do it, because then you just wasted mana. Scavengers, as you saw me, can dig you out of a little bit of things. I mean, any incremental life gain is good incremental life gain. Moving right along, you also have things like, let's see here. This guy's actually pretty alright. It kills up a Great Revel. Eidolon the Great Revel. So just worth noting that you can block something and then instant speed kill the Eidolon the Great Revel. So use that towards your advantage. Voice is alright. It's good for blocks. Lightning Helix, I can't believe I skipped that. That's the old school thing. I remember when Lightning Helix was like OP, and now it's like one of the things that you start shaving off if you play a Zoo deck. Power creep, man. Is in fact pretty good against them. You got to make sure again not to get blown out, but if you do it in response to things, you might be able to counteract one of their burn spells, kill off a Goblin Guide, and that's actually very very helpful for you. Dramalka's Command again is a perfect spell to use. Mostly the ones that are going to be relevant is prevent all damage, an instant or sorcery would deal. That's going to be big, especially if you can get a Searing Blaze off of that. Then you prevent the damage to you, and it doesn't kill your creature. The other one is target creature fights another creature. If you got a Noctowl out, you can probably kill like a Goblin Guide, so you're pretty free to do that. But the Sacrifice Enchantment is actually a little bit bigger because it kills off a Eidolon the Great Revel, and that's sort of like the bane of existences. Moving into Sword territory, I wouldn't do Sword territory unless you have Mana Dorks available. I've used Sword of Fire and Ice to kind of help. It kills off their creatures. If they're more red deck wins, you can kind of do it. Sword of Light and Shadow is very, very good because then you gain 3 life and you get return blockers, and that's kind of important. And Sword of War and Peace is bigger because you just gain life, and also means that your dude can't get like burned out. That being said, the only time I've really efficiently won with swords was when I was attaching them to Birds of Paradise and attacking. So just putting it out there. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it exists. Eidolon of Rhetoric is good. Likewise, I think I skipped it real quick, but either Sworn Canonist. These are much like Fall and Lethalia territory. They're not that great. They stop maybe a spell, but when you're got such an unfavorable matchup like Burn is, you want to make sure that you can stay ahead. Some people will tell you to ring a Blood Moon in against them. Don't. I think it's a trap. Blood Moon is alright if they're really greedy and they're running like 4-color Burn, but if they're not, you're just kind of screwing yourself. After that, you start getting into territory that's like really hard to justify having to be able to do Brindle Boar. I don't even think I've ever played Brindle Boar. I'm trying to think here. Is there like anything? And Offenza, I don't know. Kitchen Finks is all right here. Yeah, Kitchen Finks. Trying to think what else, if there's like any other kind of like life gainer kind of effects that you can get. Rock's Warmonk if you're running Blue Zoo. I've seen people. I kind of actually don't like it, but I've seen people use it and say it's the bomb. I think it's hit or miss. Leyline Sanctity, that's something that you used to use. I don't think I use it anymore, but if you've got stuff like Lantern Control, Eggs, 8 Rack, this is a good card to bring it out of your sideboard too. It'll maybe nullify half their deck. Fair warning, if it might not work game 3 though, because they might understand. Lastly, getting up to the very, very edge of it, I've used a Johnny Vargent to beat burn players, specifically Ari Lax from Star City Games, which was a fun one, to say the least. But I used it to sort of help me finalize control on the board and stabilize. Likewise, you've got Gore Clan Rampager. No, sorry, Gore Clan Rampager over here to help you beat the speed tie. And more importantly, over here at Siege Rhino, you can use Siege Rhino, and it sort of helps you pull out against red deck wins. However, if you're playing Domain Zoo, I wouldn't expect to win anyways. After that, at 5 mana, I don't know. There's I guess Bane Slayer Angel, but you're pushed to get that far. So those are the cards that I would consider bringing in against Burn. Anyways, thanks guys for watching. I hope you all learned how to beat some red deck red mages. And remember, feed your animals with fire.